Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm David Patton, and we're delighted to have with us today Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Good to have you with us today, Senator.
It's great to be back with you and Newsmax.
Senator Lieberman, with the deadline fast approaching for some sort of a deal on raising the debt ceiling, do you think there will be a deal, and what form do you expect it may take?
Well, there has to be an agreement on raising the debt ceiling, and the question is whether the president and members of Congress of both parties will be wise enough and strong enough to do so before the existing debt ceiling expires, and there's a question about whether America can really manage its own finances. In other words, we all know how this has to end. America's too deeply in debt. Major entitlement programs that are wonderful programs like Social Security and Medicare are costing much more money than people are contributing to them, so they're adding to our debt. I mean, we all know that in the end, the way we're going to get America's books back in balance and avoid a disaster is by cutting spending and raising revenue. There's just no mysterious alternative. And the question is whether we're going to be smart enough to do that before August 2nd, when we need to raise the debt ceiling, so-called, or America will not be able to borrow money anymore. And I can tell you that I've made a decision myself, which I never thought I would make, that I think that the danger of not moving boldly to cut the national debt is actually greater than the danger that will ensue by not increasing the debt ceiling. That I've said that I'm not going to vote to increase the debt ceiling to allow us to take on more debt unless at the same time we adopt a very bold program to cut our national debt by cutting spending and raising revenue. And I believe we've got to do more of the spending cuts than the revenue increases, particularly now when our economy is still struggling to come out of the recession.
Now, Senator, you have proposed an approach, a solution for addressing the entitlements problem that our nation faces, a rather different proposal than Representative Paul Ryan's. We hear that former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty is preparing one as well. I'm curious, does it trouble you that the White House hasn't really addressed the entitlements issue yet, and some say it is leading from behind?
Well, it does, and that does trouble me. I mean, look, generally speaking, and it's too simplistic, but there's too much truth to it, Republicans have said they don't want to raise revenue, and Democrats as much as we need to, and Democrats have said they don't want to cut spending as much as we need to. And in doing so, each party is both reflecting its own ideology, but also, frankly, being political and thinking of the next election. But honestly, the debt crisis that America faces as we hurtle toward a fiscal cliff is so serious that we've got to stop thinking about the next election and start thinking about the next generation of Americans. And you just can't get America back in balance long term. And frankly, you can't promise anybody that, for instance, Medicare will be here as we know it unless you do some dramatic things to balance the Medicare books. And I'm really proud that I was able to come together with Tom Coburn, a Republican colleague, senator, friend from Oklahoma, conservative, on a Medicare program, reform program, that will both cut the debt and save Medicare. It's different than Paul Ryan's program. Paul Ryan ultimately privatizes Medicare. I respect him for having the guts to make a recommendation that responds to the crisis. I don't agree with what he proposed.
And a few questions quickly on the Middle East, if we may. Is the drawdown of troops in Afghanistan happening too abruptly, in your view, Senator?
Well, I worry that the president in the withdrawal sequence that he's ordered in Afghanistan, has ordered the troops to come out too quickly and taken on some risk and put our military under pressure that they ought not to be under. And I just want to make clear that the differences here between someone like me and President Obama are not great, but they do have serious consequences. Here's what I mean. I agree that the 33,000 additional troops, the so-called surge, that President Obama ordered into Afghanistan at the end of 2009 ought to be out of Afghanistan as soon as possible. In my opinion, that ought to be hopefully by the end of 2012 or the very beginning of 2013. I think the president pretty much agrees with that, except he's forcing all of them to be out by September of 2012. And it's only a few months difference, but here's why it's significant. There's a fighting season in Afghanistan based on the weather. The fighting season goes until October. The American military leadership, all of them recommended to President Obama that he not begin that final drawdown of these 33,000 extra troops until October of 2012 when the fighting season was over. So I think in ordering that this happened by the end of September, the president has put extra pressure on the American military. But I'm just back from Afghanistan. I went with Senator John McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham. We were with our troops where we wanted to be on July 4th to thank them. They're doing an extraordinary job, as are the Afghan troops, and they'll make this new withdrawal schedule work, but I think it puts them under more pressure and adds some risk that should not be there.
Now, on Iran, we know that nation is meddling in countries throughout the Middle East right now, and you've said that its day of reckoning is coming. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, the State Department says that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and they are. They're sponsoring Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza. They're training Shia militias in Iraq that have been responsible for killing thousands of Iraqis and hundreds of American soldiers. Not so long ago, if there was another nation training soldiers to go in to a third country and killed hundreds of Americans, we'd go to war against that nation. Also, the Iranians have been brutally suppressive of their own people, killing a lot of them, really treating women and minorities terribly. So when I said the other day that there's a day of reckoning coming to this regime in Iran, this extremist Islamist regime, what I meant was, and hopefully soon, that its people would rise up against it. And I hope at that moment that we, the rest of the world, will do everything we can to support the Iranian people, who are much better than their government and deserve a much better life than their government is giving them.
Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, author of the upcoming book, The Gift of Rest, which will be coming out in August. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsmax TV.
Great pleasure. All the best to you and all my friends at Newsmax.
And thank you for joining us on Newsmax TV.